CreepyCorner stories.
Hey everyone, welcome back to CreepyCorner stories. You know, diving into the dark web is always risky, but sharing these stories with you makes it worth it. I'm curious, where are you watching this from right now? Let me know in the comments below. I've noticed that these kinds of stories hit differently depending on where you are. It might even make the experience a little creepier. So, tell me, are you watching from the safety of your home or somewhere less secure? I found a dark web job working at the most secret Vatican library. I just found envelope with horrifying rules that weren't in the employment manual. There are moments in life when your instincts scream at you to turn back, to drop everything, run, and never look back. I ignored mine, and now, every night, I hear them whispering my name. I see the man in white standing in the corner of my room, watching me with his hollow, empty face. I see the shadows move, even when there is no light. I feel something breathing behind me in the dark. And worst of all, I know they're waiting for me to break the rules, waiting for me to belong to them, had nothing left. This started, as most horrible things do, with desperation. I was broke. Not just struggling, I mean 3 months behind on rent, credit cards maxed out, phone bill overdue, final eviction notice taped to my door, kinda broke. No job, no savings, no family that gave a shit. I was about 2 weeks away from sleeping on the street. I tried everything. I applied for hundreds of jobs, retail, fast food, warehouse work. Either they weren't hiring or they never called me back. I started looking at under-the-table gigs, Craigslist, shady Telegram groups, the kind of work where you don't ask questions, but nothing paid enough. Nothing could save me. That's when I remembered the deep web job forums. Now, I know what you're thinking. The deep web? Seriously? But here's the thing. The real deep web isn't all red rooms and black market organs. It's just a place. A place where people post things they don't want on Google. A place where desperate people go when they have nowhere else to turn. And that night, I was desperate. The job that shouldn't exist. It was buried deep. A job board tucked away behind layers of encrypted links. The kind of site that looked like it hadn't been updated since 2003. Most of the listings were exactly what you'd expect. People looking for hackers, counterfeiters, private investigators. A guy offering $5,000 for a human test subject. Then I saw it. A blank post. No title, no description. Just a black square in the middle of the page. Something about it made my skin crawl. I clicked it, and suddenly words appeared. Private archivist needed. Location, Vatican City. Salary, $10,000 per month. Must be comfortable with discretion. That was it. No other details. No requirements. Just a button that said, apply. My heart pounded. $10,000 a month. That wasn't just good money. That was insane money. Too good to be true. Something felt wrong, but I was desperate. I hesitated, then typed in my initials. DC, no email, no phone number, no ID. I hit submit. The page refreshed, and 3 words appeared. Submission received. That was it. No confirmation, no contact details, nothing. Like the job had never existed. I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen, my stomach twisted in knots. Something wasn't right. But exactly 1 hour later, my phone rang, and everything changed. The call no caller ID. I almost didn't answer, but I did. And the second I did, I regretted it. A voice, low, smooth, unnaturally calm, spoke my full name. Not D. Carter, not Mr. Carter. My full real name. My blood turned to ice. I hadn't given them my full name. I hadn't even used my real laptop. Yes, I said, my throat dry. You have been selected, the voice said. It wasn't a question. You will receive your travel itinerary within the hour, they continued. Do you accept the position? I hesitated. Every instinct in my body told me to say no. But then I thought about my bank account, my rent, that $10,000 a month. Yes, I said. Good, the voice replied. Follow the instructions exactly. Do not deviate. Do not be late. Click. The line went dead. My hands were shaking. I checked my email, and there it was. A first-class ticket to Rome, a hotel reservation, a Vatican City work visa, already approved. I should have run. Instead, I packed my bags, and that was my first mistake. The plane was too nice. I'd never flown first class before. Leather seats, hot towels, flight attendants that smiled too much. And the other passengers, they didn't talk. They barely moved. Something was wrong. Halfway through the flight, a flight attendant leaned down. Mr. Carter, she whispered. I nodded. She slipped a folded piece of paper onto my tray table and walked away. I opened it. It was handwritten. Short. Do not speak to anyone on this flight. Do not sleep. I felt sick. I glanced around. The man across from me had lowered his newspaper. He was staring at me. I pocketed the note and did not close my eyes the entire flight. Vatican City. When I landed, there was no customs check. No security. Just a man in a black suit standing at the gate with a sign that said, Carter. He led me to an unmarked black car. We drove through Rome in silence. We passed the Colosseum, the Pantheon, a McDonald's with a full wine menu. Then we reached Vatican City. I expected to be taken to a library, a church, a museum. Instead, we stopped in front of a windowless stone building. The driver handed me a key. Your quarters, he said. You begin work tomorrow, 7 a.m. sharp. Then he drove away. I was alone. The air felt thick. I turned the key and stepped inside. The room was bare. A cot, a desk, a closet, and on the cot was a sealed envelope. No name, no return address, just a black wax seal with a symbol I didn't recognize. I tore it open. Inside were two things, a handwritten note and a single sheet of paper. I unfolded the note first. These are the rules. Do not break them. You will not get a second warning. My stomach turned. I unfolded the paper, and I swear to God, I stopped breathing. There are things you don't understand about the world. Things none of us understand. Things buried deep in the cracks of history, hidden behind vaults, locked away in places where no one will ever accidentally find them. We tell ourselves the world makes sense, that the laws of nature and physics and time are unbreakable. But I've seen the cracks. I've looked inside, and I know now. We were never supposed to see what was inside. The envelope. The envelope sat on the cot, waiting for me. The wax seal was thick, like the kind you see in medieval movies, deep black, pressed with a symbol I didn't recognize. It looked ancient. The edges of the paper were brittle and yellowed, and when I lifted it, I swore I could smell something, like old, rotting parchment, like skin. I swallowed hard and broke the seal. Inside were two things, a single sheet of yellowed paper, a short, handwritten note. I opened the note first. The handwriting was slanted, sharp, like someone had written it in a hurry. It read, "These are the rules. Do not break them. You will not get a second warning. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. My hands were shaking as I unfolded the second sheet, and that's when I saw the list. A list of rules. Rules that made no sense. Rules for the Vatican Archives staff. You will be escorted to the library every morning at exactly 7 a.m. Do not attempt to leave your quarters before this time. Never attempt to enter the library alone. Your escort will unlock the doors. If the doors are already open when you arrive, do not enter. Wait. If they do not close within 10 minutes, return to your quarters and lock the door. You may hear whispers while working. Do not respond. If the whispers continue for more than 5 minutes, place your ID badge on the nearest table and exit the library immediately. Some of the books will have no titles, no authors, and no publication information. If you find one, do not open it. Hand it to your supervisor immediately. If you notice that a book is missing from where you last placed it, do not look for it. Do not mention it. Continue working. You will see a man in a white robe between the shelves. He does not work here. Do not acknowledge him. At exactly 11:11 a.m., you will hear footsteps. Count them. If there are more than 13, hide under the nearest table and do not move until your escort comes for you. If at any point the lights go out, close your eyes and cover your ears. Do not move until the lights return. If you see something when they come back, do not describe it. Not to your supervisor, not to your escort, not to anyone. You must leave the library at exactly 5 p.m. If your escort does not arrive, begin walking towards the exit. Do not run. Do not stop. Do not turn around. If you hear your own voice speaking to you from the stacks, leave immediately and burn the clothes you were wearing that day. Do not pray inside the library. If you find another copy of this rule list that is not your own, report it immediately. Someone is lying. Something was watching me. My vision blurred. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. My hands clenched the paper so hard my fingers hurt, but I couldn't let go. I read the list again, and again, and again. The room felt wrong. I had that feeling you get when you're alone, but somehow you're not. Like something was watching me. I looked up. The small crucifix nailed above my cot had tilted. It was leaning at a strange, impossible angle, like someone had just touched it. But I never heard a sound, never felt anything move. I took a slow, shaking breath. Then I noticed the bottom of the page, because there was something else, something new. It was written in fresh, dark ink, not typed like the rest. It read, 13. If you find a page that looks like this one, but the rules are different, burn it immediately. Do not read it. Do not ask about it. Do not let anyone see you with it. If someone else finds it first, run. The scratching. I dropped the paper like it burned me. Something about that lost rule. It felt wrong. Like it was added later. Like it wasn't meant to be there. The air felt heavy. I stood up too fast, my legs shaking, and that's when I heard it. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A faint, slow scratching sound, coming from inside the walls. I froze. It was light at first, soft, like the sound of nails against wood. Then it got louder, more frantic, like something was inside the wall, clawing to get out. The air grew colder. I backed up until I hit the far wall, my breath shaking. The scratching was coming closer, closer. I couldn't breathe. And then, silence. The scratching stopped. The room was dead quiet. And then, from right behind me, a whisper. Did you read the last rule? I didn't sleep. That night, I didn't move. I didn't turn around. I didn't even breathe. I stayed frozen, staring straight ahead, my body locked in place. I didn't need to turn around. I knew, deep in my gut, something was standing right behind me. I closed my eyes. I counted in my head. 1, 2, 3. And then I ran. I grabbed the paper off the floor and threw myself onto the cot, shoving it under the thin pillow, curling into myself, and waiting for something to grab me, waiting for the whispers to start again, waiting for the scratching to return. But nothing happened. I stayed awake all night. The crucifix on the wall never moved again, but I could still feel it. Something watching me, something waiting, because tomorrow I would enter the library, and I already knew I wasn't supposed to be there. There are places in this world that should have been forgotten, buried, erased, but instead, someone kept them, locked them behind doors that don't belong to this world, and then they sent me inside. Morning came, too fast. I never slept. I sat on the cot, my back pressed against the cold stone wall, staring at the crucifix above me. It didn't move again. Nothing whispered, nothing scratched, but I could feel it. Something had been here, and it wasn't gone. At exactly 6:59 a.m., there was a knock at my door. Knock, knock, knock. Slow, rhythmic, like someone testing the sound. I hesitated. The rules. Do not leave your quarters before 7 a.m. I looked at my phone. 6:59. The knock came again. I held my breath. Then, at the exact second, my phone turned to 7 a.m. The door unlocked by itself. A loud click. I didn't open it. It opened for me. The escort. A man stood on the other side. Tall, thin, wearing a Vatican security uniform that looked wrong. Not old, exactly, but out of place, like it had been stitched together from something else. His face was too smooth. His eyes were too dark, and his lips never moved when he spoke. Follow me. That was all he said. Then he turned and walked. I followed, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. Something told me if I didn't step out of that room right then and there, I was never leaving it again. The hallway that changed. The Vatican is huge, but the hallway we walked through felt too long, like it was stretching as we moved. The walls were wrong too. They looked ancient, older than the Vatican itself. Faded frescoes peeled from the ceiling, the colors too dark to recognize. There were statues, too, life-size saints lining the walls, carved from stone, but their faces were worn away. No features, just smooth, eyeless, gaping holes where their expressions should have been. I kept my eyes on the ground. I didn't look at them, and thank God I didn't, because out of the corner of my vision, I swear to God, one of them moved. The library doors. The hallway ended at a set of massive iron doors. No windows, no markings, just smooth, blackened metal that smelled like blood. The security guard reached into his coat and pulled out a key. Not a modern one. A rusted, jagged, ancient-looking thing, like it had been pulled from a grave. He slid it into the lock, and as soon as the key turned, the whispers started. Software distant, like 100 voices speaking from the other side of the door. I went ice cold. The guard didn't react. He just pushed the doors open, revealing darkness. No lights, no candles, just a long stretching corridor filled with bookshelves that faded into nothing. This is where you work now, the guard said. Then he handed me an ID badge and closed the doors behind me, leaving me alone. Something was in there with me. I stood still, not breathing, not moving. I wanted to turn back, to pound on the doors, but I already knew they wouldn't open. I was locked in. The room smelled wrong, Not dusty, like an old library should smell, but rotting, damp, breathing. And in the distance, somewhere deep in the stacks, something shifted. I wasn't alone. I gripped my badge so hard my fingers ached. The rules. If you hear whispers, do not respond. If you see a man in white, do not acknowledge him. If you hear your own voice speaking to you, burn your clothes and leave immediately. I had to stay calm. I had to follow the rules. I took a slow, careful step forward. The floor creaked beneath me. And then, a voice, right behind me. "You're not supposed to be here." I turned. I didn't mean to. It was reflex, and I regret it more than anything, because what I saw, standing between the shelves, watching me with empty black eyes, was me. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't breathe. I just ran. Through the endless, winding bookshelves, past tables covered in open books with moving pages, past statues with blank faces that hadn't been there before. The air got thicker. The smell of rot grew stronger. The whispers rose to screams. And behind me, I could hear it. My own footsteps, chasing me, getting closer. Then, silence. Everything stopped. And ahead of me, standing between the shelves, was a man in white robes, waiting, watching, with no face, just smooth, featureless skin where his mouth and eyes should have been. His head tilted. He reached for me. And then, the lights went out. I shouldn't be alive. I don't remember what happened next. I don't know how long I was in the dark. All I know is I woke up outside the library doors, flat on my back, ID badge clenched in my fist. My hands were covered in dust, and my clothes smelled like smoke, like they'd been burned. I don't remember burning them. I don't remember anything, but when I looked up, the guard was standing over me, expressionless, like he'd been waiting. "You're late," he said, and he handed me a new list of rules. Rules that were different. I shouldn't be alive. I know that now. I should have been swallowed by the dark. I should have never woken up outside those doors, because whatever was in that library, it didn't want me to leave, and I think it still doesn't. Something was wrong with the list. I sat up slowly, my body aching. The Vatican security guard, the one with the face that was just a little too smooth, the skin that was just a little too tight, was watching me. He held out a new sheet of paper, another list. I hesitated. My hands were still shaking as I took it. I didn't want to look, but I had to. And the second my eyes hit the page, my stomach turned to ice. Because the list was different. The rules had changed. Updated rules for the Vatican archive staff. Your escort will arrive at exactly 7 a.m. If they do not arrive, you are no longer an employee. Hide. You must never leave the library after 5 p.m. If you are inside at that time, stay where you are. Do not leave until sunrise. If you see a book that has your name on the spine, do not open it. Do not touch it. Find your supervisor immediately. If you hear a voice calling for help, ignore it. It is not real. The man in white will now acknowledge you. If he speaks, do not answer. If he reaches for you, do not move. If he opens his mouth, close your eyes. If you see what is inside, you will not leave. If a book follows you home, return it before midnight. Do not let it enter your bed. Do not step on any of the shadows. Some of them are not yours. If you hear your own voice whispering a secret you've never told, you have 30 seconds to leave the library. If you do not, it will take your place. There is a staircase in the back of the library that was not there before. Do not go near it. Do not look at it. Do not think about it. It is not for you. Do not bleed inside the library. If you do, you must leave before it finds you. If you find another copy of this list, compare the rules. If anything is different, burn it immediately. Someone has rewritten them. Someone is trying to get in. If you realize you are being followed, keep walking. If they get too close, enter a room with no windows and turn off the lights. If they enter with you, do not move, do not breathe, do not think, do not exist. I wasn't supposed to leave. The second I finished reading, I felt it. A pressure in the air, like something had just shifted around me, like I had just broken something. I looked up at the security guard. His eyes were dark. Too dark. "You're late," he said again. Then he turned and started walking. I didn't want to follow him, but I didn't have a choice, because something in the air had changed. And for the first time since I arrived, I felt like I wasn't supposed to be outside the library. I felt like I had brought something out with me. The library looked different. The iron doors groaned as they opened, the same way they did before. But this time, the library looked different. The shelves were closer. The ceiling was higher. The light from the chandeliers was dimmer. And the smell was worse, like something had been left to rot between the pages. The security guard didn't step inside. He just stood at the threshold, watching me. "You have work to do," he said. Then he shut the doors behind me, and I was alone again. The books were watching me. I tried to focus on my job. I really did. I walked to the nearest shelf and started organizing. Some of the books were so old they crumbled at the touch. Some were bound in leather that felt too soft, too familiar. Some had titles that changed when I blinked, and some had no title at all. I didn't touch those. I remembered the rules. If you find a book with no title, hand it to your supervisor immediately. But I never saw a supervisor. There was no one else here, just me, and the books, and the sound of someone breathing between the shelves. The book with my name. I don't know how long I worked. Time felt wrong in that place. But at some point, as I reached for another book, I saw it. A thin, black volume, with my name on the spine. I froze. Rule number 3. If you see a book that has your name on the spine, do not open it. Do not touch it. Find your supervisor immediately. I stepped back. I felt sick. I shouldn't have looked at it, because now that I had, I swear to God, I could hear it whispering. My voice, from inside the pages, saying things I had never said, telling secrets I had never told. And then, the book moved. It slid forward, just an inch, like it was waiting for me to take it. I turned and ran, and that's when I saw it. The staircase, the one that wasn't there before, spiraling down, 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 into the dark. And something was waiting at the bottom. Something smiling. Something that looked just like me. I'm not safe here. I don't remember how I got back to my quarters. I don't remember running. I don't remember opening the doors. But I must have. Because suddenly, I was inside my room, the door locked behind me, my hands shaking, and sitting on the cot, waiting for me, was another sealed envelope, another list. I didn't want to open it. I knew it would be different, because every time I enter that library, the rules change, and I'm starting to think they aren't for my protection, they're for whatever is inside that place, because something wants me to break them, something wants me to forget, something wants me to stay, and worst of all, I don't know if I'm still me, because when I looked into the mirror, My reflection didn't move. There are things worse than death. I know that now. I know what it means to be trapped, to be erased from the world, to lose yourself piece by piece, like pages torn from a book, until there's nothing left of you but words someone else wrote. Because I think that's what this place does. I think it's rewriting me, and I don't know if I can stop it. The envelope was already open. I don't know how long I sat on the cot, staring at the envelope. I didn't want to touch it. I didn't want to see what it said, because I knew, deep in my bones, the rules were different now. They were always different now. But then I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The wax seal was already broken. Someone had opened it before me, and inside, the paper wasn't folded neatly like before. It was crumpled, like someone had already read it, like someone had already tried to follow the rules, and failed. My hands shook as I unfolded the page, and then I stopped breathing, because there was only one rule now, just one. Final rule for the Vatican Archives staff. 1. Leave. Now do not pack your things. Do not turn off the lights. Do not look at your reflection. Do not listen to the voice outside your door. You have already been replaced. If you see yourself in the hallway, do not speak. Do not run. It is faster than you. You have one chance to get out. If you hesitate, you will belong to the library. Go. The knock at the door. I dropped the paper. The room was too quiet. The air felt thick, heavy, like I was breathing something that wasn't air anymore. And then, a knock. Slow, rhythmic, wrong. Knock, knock, knock. Like someone testing the sound. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then, a voice. My voice. Let me in. I gripped the edges of the cot, my body frozen. It wasn't possible. I was inside the room. I was right here. But outside, the thing with my voice knocked again. Please, it said. I need to talk to you. Something sharp curled in my stomach. It sounded like me, but not exactly. Like a recording played back 1 second too slow. Like someone had learned my voice, but didn't quite get it right. I didn't answer. I knew better now. The thing outside wasn't me. It was the thing that had been following me through the library, and it was waiting for me to make a mistake, waiting for me to open the door. I was never alone. I stood up, moving as quietly as possible. I didn't pack anything. I didn't even look at my shadow. I just walked to the door. Hand shaking, I reached for the handle. But then, from behind me, a whisper, right in my ear. Wrong door. I spun around. The room was empty, but something was wrong. I could feel it, like I was being watched from inside my own head. The whisper hadn't come from the door. It had come from inside the room. And that's when I saw it. The mirror. It was small. Just a cheap, cracked piece of glass nailed to the far wall. I hadn't even noticed it before. But now I couldn't look away, because my reflection wasn't moving. I raised my hand. It didn't. I blinked. It kept staring. Then, slowly, it smiled, and whispered in my own voice, I told you not to look. The hallway that shouldn't exist. I turned and yanked the door open. The hallway outside was different, longer, wrong. The walls were stretched. The floor was too dark, like something was beneath it, something waiting. But I didn't stop. I ran. The lights above me flickered, buzzing like dying flies. And then, behind me, I heard footsteps, heavy, slow, following me, getting closer. I didn't turn around. I knew what the rule said. If you realize you're being followed, keep walking. But then I saw it. The exit. A single unmarked door at the end of the hall. slightly open, and beyond it, a light. I sprinted. The footsteps behind me grew louder. The walls around me twisted. The ceiling lowered. The air turned thick with whispers. Dozens of voices, all chanting my name. Daniel, Daniel, Daniel. Something brushed my back. Fingers. Cold. Wrong. I reached for the door. I didn't think. I just lunged. And then, everything went black. I shouldn't be here. I woke up in my apartment, in my own bed, the morning light streaming through the window. Everything was normal, like none of it had happened, like it had all been a dream. But then I turned over and saw the envelope, sitting on my nightstand, unsealed, waiting. I don't want to open it. I don't want to know, but I already do, because I've been hearing things, soft scratches inside my walls, a whisper, just before I fall asleep. And last night, I woke up to see something standing in the corner of my room, tall, thin, wearing a white robe, waiting, watching, smiling. And when I turned on the light, I swear to God, it had my face. Final entry. I don't know if I escaped. I don't know if I ever left. Because when I looked in the mirror this morning, for just a second, I saw my reflection blink too late, like it was catching up, like it wasn't really me. And I think I know what the last rule really meant. I was never supposed to leave. Not me. Not the real me. Because something else came back instead. And now it's just waiting. Waiting for me to forget. Waiting for me to slip. Waiting to take my place for good. And when it does, I don't think anyone will notice. Not even me. My friend told me to never open the Simpson channel if I find it on the dark web. But when I turned it on, I was absolutely horrified. Alright, so I don't even know where to start with this, because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. You ever see something so messed up that your brain just refuses to process it? Like, your body physically reacts before you even understand what you're looking at. That's what happened to me a few nights ago, and I feel like I need to get this out there before I lose my mind. Let me back up a bit. My name's Jake. I'm 22. I live in a pretty normal apartment in Chicago, and up until recently, I thought I had a pretty high tolerance for creepy stuff. I mean, I grew up watching those disturbing YouTube horror animations at 2 a.m., played every horror game out there, and yeah, I've been down some weird rabbit holes on Reddit and TikTok, but nothing could have prepared me for the Simpson channel. Now, before you start thinking this is some dumb lost episode creepypasta, let me be clear. This isn't about some bootleg, poorly animated, edgy fan-made crap. This was real. It started with my friend, Tyler. We've known each other since middle school, and while I went the normal route, college, job, bills, Tyler, well, let's just say he got way too into the deep web. He was obsessed with finding the weirdest, most disturbing sites. Not just gore and hacking forums, but stuff that wasn't supposed to exist. He once sent me a video of what looked like a live stream from an abandoned Chuck E. Cheese somewhere in Europe, where the animatronics were moving on their own with no one in the building. Another time, he showed me a website that tracked missing people. But the weird part? The pictures updated in real time. I don't even want to know how they got those images. Anyway, last week, Tyler called me at like 3 a.m., absolutely freaking out. Bro, whatever you do, if you ever come across the Simpson channel, do not open it. I was half asleep, so I just laughed. What? Is it like some weird porn site or something? Tyler didn't laugh. In fact, he was dead silent for a few seconds before he said, "No, dude, it's worse. I shouldn't have even clicked it. It's not a show. It's watching us." And then he hung up. Now, at this point, I should have just left it alone, right? Wrong. Because, like an idiot, my curiosity got the best of me. The next day, I tried to call Tyler, but he wouldn't answer. I figured he was messing with me. So I did the worst thing I could have done. I went digging. I started searching for anything related to the Simpson channel. At first, nothing came up. No Reddit threads, no mentions on Discord, nothing. But then, after scrolling through some really shady deep web forums, I found a post. Anyone else seen the Simpsons channel? I swear it's not a normal stream. The longer you watch, the more it changes. And I think it knows. The post had 0 replies. Like, no one wanted to touch this topic. That should have been my first red flag. But again, I'm an idiot. At the bottom of the post, there was a link. Not a normal .com or .net link, but some long-ass string of random letters and numbers. A .onion link, meaning I'd have to use Tor to access it. Now, for those of you who don't know, Tor is basically a browser that lets you go on the dark web. It's what people use for shady things, like buying stolen credit cards, or worse. I wasn't planning on actually clicking the link, but before I even realized what I was doing, I had Tor open. I typed in the link, hit enter, and just like that, I was in. The site was basic. No flashy graphics, no menus, just a black screen with a single button in the middle. Watch now, and underneath, in small red text, do not look away. At this point, I had every reason to close the page, but of course, I didn't. I clicked watch now, and the second that stream loaded, I felt my stomach drop, because I wasn't watching The Simpsons. The Simpsons were watching me. The second that stream loaded, something in my body immediately told me to shut it off. My hands went cold, my chest tightened, and every instinct screamed at me to close the tab and walk away. But I didn't, because the moment the video started playing, I realized something was very, very wrong. At first, it looked like a normal episode of The Simpsons. Classic animation, bright colors, the same old theme song, but there was no intro, no couch gag, no credits, just a silent fade-in to the Simpson family sitting in their living room, completely still. And when I say still, I mean unnaturally still. Their eyes were wide open, their mouths slightly agape, frozen mid-smile. It was like they were waiting for something. I squinted at the screen, trying to figure out if it was just lagging. But then, out of nowhere, Homer's head snapped toward the screen. Not a smooth animation, not a natural movement, just a jerky, unnatural snap, like a frame had been skipped. And that's when I noticed something that made my stomach churn. The background. It wasn't a normal Simpsons backdrop. Instead of the pastel-colored walls of their house, it was a grainy, black and white video feed, like a security camera. And then I saw it. A figure. A dark, blurry figure, standing in the background, barely visible behind the static. It wasn't animated. It didn't look like it belonged in the show. It looked real. And then Bart turned his head just like Homer, snapping toward me. My heart nearly stopped, because as Bart's face twisted into a grotesque, unnatural grin, the static in the background cleared up, and I realized that the security camera footage was my apartment. I slammed my laptop shut so hard I almost cracked the screen. My heart was pounding. My ears were ringing. and for a full minute I just sat there, frozen, my breathing sharp and uneven. There was no way I had just seen that. No way. I forced myself to stand up, glancing around my room like a lunatic, expecting to see something. Someone lurking in the shadows. But there was nothing. Just the faint hum of my mini fridge, the distant sound of cars outside. I wiped the sweat off my forehead and took a shaky breath. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe they pulled my IP address, or some freaky algorithm generated a background that looked similar to my apartment. That had to be it. But I needed to be sure. So, against every ounce of common sense, I opened my laptop back up. The stream was still playing, but the Simpsons were gone. The screen showed my bedroom, live. I could see myself sitting on the bed, staring at my laptop screen. My blood turned to ice. I whipped my head around, looking for a camera, some kind of hidden device, but there was nothing. My webcam was covered with a sticker. I didn't own any smart home devices. And then, the closet door in the stream opened, but in real life, it didn't. I watched, frozen, as the closet door in the stream creaked open, frame by frame, like someone was standing just beyond it, pushing it open so slowly. But my real-life closet door remained shut. I couldn't breathe. And then, a hand emerged from the darkness in the stream. Pale, bony, too many fingers. I was done. I slammed my laptop shut again, grabbed my keys, and bolted. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I just needed to get the hell out of there. I ran outside, barely registering the cold wind slapping me in the face. I jumped into my car and just drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to be somewhere public, somewhere with people. I ended up at a McDonald's, of all places. It was late, almost 2 a.m., so the only people inside were some night shift workers and a few drunk college kids. I sat in a corner booth, my leg bouncing like crazy, trying to rationalize what the hell just happened. Then my phone vibrated. A notification. Unknown. Number. Don't look away. I nearly dropped my phone. Then another notification, this time from Instagram. I opened it. It was a tagged photo. My stomach dropped. It was a picture of me, sitting in the exact booth I was in, staring at my phone. I snapped my head up, scanning the restaurant. My hands were shaking. There was no one pointing a camera at me, no one even looking in my direction. And then, my phone vibrated again. Unknown. Number. Check your reflection. I felt pure animal terror in that moment. My mouth went dry. My entire body tensed up as I slowly turned to look at the window beside me. And I swear to God, I felt my soul leave my body, because in the reflection, I wasn't alone. Sitting right next to me in the booth was a man, tall, gaunt, dressed in a dark suit, his skin pale as death. But the worst part, his face was blurry, like a corrupted image, like my brain refused to process it. I whipped around. The booth was empty, nothing but cold air beside me. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands and looked back at the window. He was closer, right up against the glass. No eyes, no mouth, just static where his face should be. I don't remember much after that, just the feeling of falling, like my body had shut down from pure terror, like I was being pulled away from reality. And the last thing I remember before everything went black was him whispering in a voice that wasn't a voice, "Do not look away." I woke up in my car, not in the McDonald's parking lot, not even in my city. I was on the side of a highway, the kind that stretches for miles, with nothing but fields and scattered trees on either side. It was still dark, but a sickly, dim orange glow hung in the sky, like the sun was trying to rise but couldn't. My phone was dead. My hands were ice cold on the steering wheel, and I had no memory of how I got there. I checked the dashboard. My gas tank was full, which didn't make sense. I barely had a quarter tank when I pulled into McDonald's. Had I been driving this whole time? My head was pounding. My body felt heavy, like I hadn't moved in hours. I stepped out of the car, my breath clouding in the air. The road was empty. No cars, no distant sounds of civilization, just the low whistle of wind and the occasional flicker of the streetlights, buzzing faintly in the dark. I should have stayed inside the car. I should have tried to drive somewhere, anywhere, but instead, I walked to the edge of the road and looked into the field beside me, and I saw them, rows of figures, barely visible through the mist hanging over the grass. They were motionless, standing shoulder to shoulder, stretching out into the darkness as far as I could see. Not people, not quite. I took a step closer, squinting. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Their silhouettes were wrong. Too tall, limbs too thin, heads tilted at unnatural angles. And then I realized they were all facing me. I felt a sharp pulse of nausea hit me, my stomach twisting into knots. I wasn't supposed to be here. A cold gust of wind blew past me, and that's when I heard it. The sound of shuffling feet, not from the figures, from behind me. I turned around so fast I nearly fell, my body instinctively backing toward my car. My legs felt weak, every muscle in my body screaming to run, run, run. But then I saw where I really was, and my stomach dropped into a black hole. This wasn't a highway, it was a loop. The road stretched in a perfect circle. Every direction I looked, the same road, the same streetlights, the same endless fields of motionless figures watching me from the darkness. My breath hitched in my throat. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. I reached for my phone again, forgetting it was dead, my fingers fumbling uselessly at the power button. Then, the radio in my car turned on. I froze. A voice crackled through the static. A cartoonish voice. Familiar. "Hello, everybody!" I recognized it immediately. Krusty the Clown. But the voice was wrong. Distorted, warped, layered with something that sounded like a wet, choking whisper underneath. And then, over the static, I heard laughter. Not Krusty's, not mine. Laughter that sounded too close. I whipped around, and there was someone standing in front of my car. Not one of the figures in the field. Not the faceless man from the McDonald's reflection. Tyler. His clothes were torn, soaked with something dark. His eyes were wide, unblinking. His mouth was moving, but no sound was coming out. I took a shaky step forward. "Tyler?" His jaw snapped open, not like a person opening their mouth. Like something had broken, like his face was splitting apart. And then, a voice that was not his came out. "Do not look away." I didn't. I couldn't. His body twitched, arms jerking at unnatural angles, his head lolling sideways, like his neck was broken. His skin was pale, almost gray. His lips cracked and split as he spoke again, this time in a rasping, wet whisper. "It sees you now." I did the only thing I could. I threw myself into my car, slammed the door, and locked it. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the keys into the ignition. The radio was still playing. "Here's your favorite episode, folks," Krusty's voice crackled. "Don't look away now." The screen in my car's dashboard lit up. It was the Simpson channel, and the feed was showing me, sitting in my car, watching myself, and in the back seat, a shape, My breath stopped. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight, my knuckles went white. I couldn't turn around. I didn't want to. The voice from the radio warped, glitching into a deep, garbled growl. "Do not look away!" And then, a hand slid over my shoulder. Fingers dug into my skin. Long. Too long. Cold. Wet. I don't remember what happened next. Only that when I woke up, I was somewhere else. Somewhere I can't escape from. And I think I'm still watching the stream. Because the screen in front of me, it's showing you. Reading this. I don't know how long I've been here. There are no clocks, no sun, no sound, except for the hum of the screen in front of me, buzzing softly like an old television set left on a dead channel, the Simpson channel. But I need you to understand something. This isn't a show. It never was. It's a window, a doorway. And I know that it's still watching you. I'm sitting in a room that isn't a room. 4 walls, a floor, a ceiling, but none of them are real. They shift when I blink, the colors bending, stretching, breathing. The air feels thick, like I'm trapped in something's throat. The screen is the only thing that stays the same. It shows you, right now, reading this, and behind you, wait, stop, don't turn around. You have to listen to me. I made the mistake of looking away. I thought closing the laptop would be enough. I thought running would save me. I thought waking up somewhere else meant I had escaped. But you can't escape something that isn't bound by rules. Something that exists outside of time. Something that doesn't just see you, it knows you. The screen flickers, and for a moment, I see my reflection. Except, it isn't mine. The face staring back at me is wrong. My skin is pale, sagging. My eyes are too big. My mouth is too wide. And then it smiles. Not a normal smile. A Simpson smile. That horrible, frozen plastic grin that stretches too far, showing too many teeth, curling up past where my cheek should end. I try to move, but I can't. I try to scream, but no sound comes out. The screen glitches, static crawling across the surface, and suddenly, I'm not alone. The walls breathe faster. The floor shifts beneath me. And then, from the shadows in the corner of the room, something steps forward. A figure. Tall. Too tall. Its skin is gray, stretched thin over its skeletal frame, and its eyes... No, it doesn't have eyes, just empty, gaping sockets. But I know it sees me. It always sees me. And then it speaks, in a voice that isn't a voice. A dry, crackling whisper that scrapes against my brain like nails on glass. Do not look away. The screen flashes. A new scene. A house. Your house. I can see the furniture, the pictures on the wall, the glow of your phone screen reflecting in your eyes, and I can see the door behind you. It's opening. The figure shifts, moving closer. I can feel its breath, hot, damp, rotting. Its hands are inches from my face, fingers twitching like they're eager to grip, to tear, to pull. I can't move. I can't breathe. But then, a noise, a new voice, software, familiar. Ay caramba. The static surges, the screen distorts, and for the first time, I see what's really been behind the signal. I see what's been watching me, watching you, the figures in the field, the faceless man in the reflection, Tyler, broken and twisted like a puppet on snapped strings. They were never separate. They were all part of it. The thing that wears their faces, that steals their voices, that lives in the static. And now, it's in your house. I need you to listen to me. Not just read. Listen. Because this isn't a story anymore. This is a warning. And if you don't take it seriously, you will end up just like me. You will end up here. The room. That isn't a room. I don't know how long I've been in this place. There are no windows, no clocks, no doors, just a screen, pulsing with static, glitching between you and the things that shouldn't exist. The walls, if you can call them that, feel alive. If I press my hand against them, they pulse back, like I'm touching the inside of something breathing. The air is thick, stale, but wet, like the air inside a mouth that's been held open too long. I'm not alone here. Something is in the walls. Something moves inside them. I can hear the slithering, the faint scratching, like fingers brushing against the other side of thin skin. Sometimes, if I stay completely still, I can hear whispers, not in English, not in any language I know. It sounds like static trying to speak. And the worst part? I think it's learning. The screen. The screen is always on. It shows you. Reading this, I see your reflection in the glow of your device. I see the way your pupils adjust to the light. I see a little twitches in your face as you read, your breathing steady but shallow. But sometimes, the screen glitches, and I see what's really behind you. The figures. You know that feeling when you're alone, but you swear someone is standing behind you. That tightness in your spine, that moment where you feel a shift in the air, like something is breathing just behind your neck. It's not your imagination. You just haven't looked fast enough. They stand there, waiting. At first, I thought they were shadows, but shadows don't watch. Shadows don't shift closer when you blink. I know that because they're here too. In this room that isn't a room. They press against the walls, their forms bulging, stretching the skin of this place. Sometimes, one of them will push through. A hand, a face. Their mouths are always open, but they never scream. They just breathe, like they're waiting for me to do something, or waiting for you to. The static man, he comes when the screen flickers. He doesn't move like a person. 1 second, he's on the other side of the room. Then he's right next to me. No footsteps, no sound, just there. His face is a smear of movement, like a corrupted video file. His hands are too long, his fingers twitching like broken antennae. When he speaks, it's not words. It's every voice I've ever known, layered on top of each other. Tyler's voice, my mother's voice, your voice. He doesn't ask for anything. He doesn't have to. Because every time I hear his voice, I feel less like myself and more like part of him. The Simpson channel, I understand now. This was never a show, never a broadcast. It was a signal, a frequency that shouldn't exist, something that bypasses reality, that reaches into places it shouldn't, that pulls people in. You think you're safe because you're just reading this, because it's just a story. But that's how it starts. First, you read about it, then you see it, then you hear it, and then it sees you. The last warning. I can't leave this place. I know that now, but you still have a chance. You need to stop reading. You need to forget this ever existed. But most importantly, do not look at the screen for too long. If you do, you'll start to notice things. The way your reflection lingers too long. The way the static on your TV sometimes forms shapes. The way your phone flickers for just a second before a notification comes in. It's always been watching, and if you look too long, you won't be able to look away. Never buy the bloody mott blanket from the dark web. It was the worst decision I could ever make in my life. Alright, before I get into this, I just want to say, I I know how stupid this sounds. Buying something from the dark web? Yeah, I've heard all the horror stories. Red rooms, hitmen, haunted objects, you name it. I used to think all of it was just creepypasta fuel, something people made up to get clout on Reddit or YouTube. But after what happened to me, I know better now. This isn't one of those, haha, spooky things happen stories. This is real. And if you're smart, you'll listen carefully because I'm not the only one this has happened to. It all started a few months ago when I got really into dark web mystery boxes. You've probably seen those YouTube videos where people buy random packages from sketchy sites and unbox them for content. Most of them are fake as hell, but I got curious. Not enough to drop thousands of dollars on some killer's evidence box, but I did end up going down a rabbit hole of weird dark web shopping sites. One of those sites was called Bloody Mart. It looked like a knockoff Amazon, but way shadier. The homepage had this grainy black and white aesthetic, like it was designed on a Windows XP computer that hadn't been updated in decades. They sold weird stuff, old medical equipment, cursed dolls, VHS tapes with titles like, "Do not watch alone." Real creative, right? And even unclaimed storage unit boxes that promised real crime scene items. Yeah, super illegal. But what caught my eye was something stupidly simple. A blanket. It was listed as vintage blood-stained blanket, do not wash. No brand, no description, just a single picture of what looked like an old, faded quilt with some dark red stains on it. It was cheap too. Only $15 plus shipping. I figured it was probably just some dumb Halloween prop, maybe a prank item, and I don't know what possessed me to actually buy it, but I did. I placed the order, paid with Bitcoin, because dark web, and forgot about it. 2 weeks later, it showed up at my door in the sketchiest package I've ever seen. No return address, no branding, just a brown paper-wrapped bundle tied with thin twine. And the weirdest part? No label. Like, how did the mail even process this thing? The second I picked it up, I knew something was wrong. It was heavy, way heavier than a normal blanket should be. And it smelled bad, like iron and mildew, like old blood. I brought it inside, and as soon as I unwrapped it, my stomach dropped. The blanket looked exactly like the picture, except the stains were so much worse. The entire bottom half was soaked in something dark brown, dried and crusted into the fabric. The edges were torn, like someone had struggled in it. And the worst part, there was a hole, right in the center. A hole shaped like a knife stab. I should have thrown it away right then and there, but I didn't, because I heard my phone buzz. I looked down and saw a new Instagram notification. Anonymous sent you a message. I don't have my DMS open, and I definitely didn't have any contacts with that name. I clicked on it. You shouldn't have bought that. I felt this deep, sinking feeling in my chest, the kind of feeling you get when you realize you seriously messed up. Then another message came in. He knows where you are now. I stood there, staring at my phone, my pulse hammering in my ears. My apartment was dead silent, except for the distant hum of the fridge. But something about that silence felt wrong, like the air had changed. I looked at the message again. He knows where you are now. I swallowed hard. I hadn't told anyone I bought this thing. Hell, I used a fake name, a burner email, and Bitcoin. I should have been completely untraceable. Then another message popped up. Check your front door. I swear to God, I felt my stomach turn to ice. I don't know why, but I listened. I moved to the door, my body on autopilot, every part of me screaming not to open it. But I did, and that's when I saw it. A single Polaroid, face down, right on my doormat. I picked it up with shaking fingers, my breath catching in my throat before I even turned it over. When I did, my entire body locked up. It was me, standing in my kitchen, holding the blanket. The photo wasn't from my phone. It wasn't from any security camera. It was taken from inside my apartment. I felt this overwhelming, nauseating wave of dread, like my body was rejecting reality. My hands started shaking so bad, I almost dropped the picture. I turned my head, scanning my apartment, expecting to see someone standing there, watching me. Nothing. The door had been locked. The windows hadn't been touched. But somehow, someone had been inside, and they were still watching. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my heart pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. My breathing was too loud, too ragged. I felt like I was going to puke. Then another message came. Put the blanket back where you found it. I stumbled back into the kitchen, staring at the thing still sitting on my counter. The dried blood looked even darker now, almost black. The smell of rust and mildew had started to soak into the air. I felt lightheaded just standing near it. I grabbed my phone, typing as fast as my hands would let me. Who the hell are you? The second I hit send, my phone started ringing. No caller ID. I didn't answer. I just stood there, staring at the screen as it vibrated in my hand. And then, suddenly, it stopped. A voicemail popped up. I didn't want to listen to it. Every part of me was screaming to just throw my phone across the room and pretend this wasn't happening. But I pressed play. And what I heard, I wish I never heard it. The message started with breathing. Deep, slow, deliberate breathing. Then, a whisper. A voice that wasn't human. It was layered, distorted, like multiple people were speaking at once. But they were all saying the same thing, perfectly in sync. You let him in. I dropped the phone. I physically recoiled like it had burned me. My whole body broke out in a cold sweat. I grabbed the blanket and shoved it back into the paper wrapping, my hands moving on pure adrenaline. I needed to get rid of it. I threw open my apartment door, ready to chuck the whole thing into the dumpster outside. But I stopped, because standing at the end of the hallway was a man, tall, motionless, his face blurred, not covered, not hidden, blurred, like a glitched out photo. His head twitched slightly, like he was trying to look at me, but couldn't quite focus. And in his hand, a knife, not just any knife, a long curved hunting knife, with a blood-stained handle. I slammed the door and locked it again, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My mind was racing, trying to process what I had just seen. That wasn't normal. That wasn't human. I backed away from the door slowly, trying not to make a sound. And then, my phone buzzed again. New message. I didn't want to look, but I did. You can't give it back. He's already inside. I froze. Inside? Inside where? I turned my head, heart hammering so hard it hurt. And then, tap, tap, tap. It was coming from my bedroom. My legs felt like cement, but I forced myself forward. Every single part of my body was screaming to run, to get out. But I needed to see. I needed to know. I reached my bedroom door. It was wide open, and the tapping, it was coming from the closet. I swallowed hard, my breath shaky. My fingers trembled as I reached for the handle. I yanked it open. Nothing. Just clothes, shoes, empty space. I let out a shaky laugh, more out of relief than anything. But then, I looked down, and I saw it. A footprint. Dark, wet. A single bloody footprint, just in front of my closet. And it wasn't mine. That was the moment I realized something was horribly, irreversibly wrong. Because I hadn't heard anything. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing. But someone had been in my room, and they were still here, somewhere, watching, waiting. I never truly understood what it meant to be paralyzed by fear until that moment. I should have run. I should have screamed. I should have done anything except just stand there, staring at the floor, my entire body locked in place, as if my bones had turned to cement. Because I saw it. A finger, sliding out from under my bed. No, not a finger. Something wrong. At first, it looked human. Pale, thin, shaking slightly as it scraped against the hardwood floor. But then I noticed the nails. Too long, too sharp, curved like claws. The way the knuckles bent backward as if the bones had been rearranged. I couldn't breathe. My vision was tunneling, and a sick, metallic taste filled my mouth. Then the finger twitched, and something else began to emerge. A hand. But it wasn't just a hand. It was bloated, like it had been soaking in water for days. The skin puckered and split in places, revealing something black and rotting underneath. The nails scraped the floor, slow and deliberate, sending this sickening sound, like metal dragging against bone, through the silence of my room. And then, it gripped the floor. It didn't move fast. It wasn't rushing to grab me. It was testing, feeling, like it was enjoying the moment. And that's when the smell hit me. Rot, decay, stagnant water, and something else. Something worse. Blood. Not fresh blood. Not like a cut or an open wound. Old, thick, clotted, like something long dead had been bleeding under my bed for days. I swallowed down the bile rising in my throat. I wanted to move. I wanted to run. But my body wasn't mine anymore. I don't know how long I stood there, my vision swimming, my body screaming for oxygen as the thing's hand tightened its grip on my floor. Then, a voice that didn't come from under my bed. Lay down. I jumped so hard I almost lost my balance. The voice came from behind me, right next to my ear. It wasn't a whisper. It wasn't a growl. It was flat, emotionless, like the words were being forced out of a mouth that didn't know how to speak. And the moment I turned around, the lights went out. Blackout. For a second, I thought I had passed out. The darkness was too complete, too absolute. No glow from my phone, no streetlights through the window, just nothing. And then, something breathed against my neck. I could hear it, feel it, wet, ragged, too close. A single breath, deep, hollow, hungry. I ran. I don't remember deciding to run. I don't remember my body breaking free from its frozen terror. But suddenly, I was sprinting, blindly crashing into furniture, the walls, the door. The door. I grabbed the handle. Locked. My fingers fumbled, shaking so badly I could barely think. I yanked the lock, pulled the door open, and I ran. I ran into the hallway. I ran down the stairs, skipping entire steps, nearly tripping. My heart was slamming against my ribs, my breath coming in sharp, panicked gasps. I made it outside. Finally. The night air hit me like a shock, and I nearly collapsed onto the pavement. I looked back at my apartment. The windows were dark. The door was still open, and in the doorway, a shadow. Tall, too tall, watching. No details, no face, just a void. I ran. I didn't think. I didn't stop. I just ran. The streets, I don't know how long I ran before I realized something was wrong. The streets were empty. I live in a city. It doesn't matter what time of night it is. There are always people, cars, lights, but there was nothing. No headlights, no noise. Just endless rows of dark, silent buildings stretching into the distance, like the entire world had vanished. I slowed down, my lungs burning, my legs barely able to hold me up. That's when I heard it. Footsteps, not behind me, not in front of me, above. I looked up, and my breath caught in my throat. There was something on the buildings, crawling, moving between them, not jumping, gliding, a dark shape, shifting between rooftops like a shadow with weight, and it was following me. I bolted, again. My legs screamed, my body felt like it was shutting down, but I didn't stop. I turned a corner and ran straight into someone, the stranger. I hit the ground hard. My hands scraped against rough pavement, and I felt warm blood spread across my palms. I looked up. A man, standing way too still. He was wearing a hoodie, black jeans. His hands were shoved in his pockets, but something was off. His face, it was too smooth. The features were there, eyes, nose, mouth, but they were blurred, unfocused, like I was looking at him through a fogged-up window. "Help!" I choked out. My voice barely worked. The man tilted his head, slowly, deliberately. Then he smiled, and I swear to God, his teeth kept going. Too many, too sharp. They stretched up, higher than they should have. He didn't move toward me. He just stood there, smiling. Then he spoke. "You took something that wasn't yours." His voice was wrong, layered, like multiple voices were speaking at once. Some male, some female, something else. I scrambled to my feet. My whole body felt like it was shutting down, my brain unable to process any of this. "Who are you?" I gasped. The man's smile didn't falter. Then he took a step forward, and I felt something crawl up my spine. Not figuratively. Something physically moved beneath my skin. I screamed. I ran. I don't remember how I got away. I don't remember anything. One moment, I was standing in that street, dying inside. The next, I was waking up, back in my apartment, lying on my bed, and the blanket was covering me. I sat up so fast, I nearly passed out. My hand shook as I grabbed my phone. No missed calls, no messages, except one, a single notification from an unknown number. I opened it. There was no text, just a picture, a Polaroid of me, asleep in my bed, and behind me, a hand reaching out, the same one from under my bed. There are nightmares you wake up from, drenched in sweat, heart racing, but then reality pulls you back. The relief washes over you like a tidal wave. And then there are nightmares where you never wake up. I was trapped in the second kind. I sat there, staring at the Polaroid, my entire body frozen. My brain felt like it was short-circuiting, unable to comprehend what I was seeing. It was me, asleep in my bed, and behind me, that hand, stretched out from the darkness, fingers too long, too swollen. The skin split open in places, revealing something black underneath. It wasn't reaching to wake me up. It was caressing my hair, like it had been there for hours. My breath hitched. My hands trembled so badly that I nearly dropped my phone. Then, the screen flickered. For a second, my reflection in the black screen changed. It wasn't me. It was something else. Something wearing my face. The eyes were too wide. The grin was too sharp. And the longer I stared, the more I felt something crawling inside my skull. I threw the phone across the room. The second it hit the floor, a sound filled my apartment. A sound I should not have heard. Breathing. Not mine. Deep, slow, wet, coming from behind me. I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but my body refused to move. And then, my bedsheets shifted. Not from me. Something underneath them moved. My stomach twisted into knots, and I slowly, so painfully slowly, turned my head. And that's when I saw the lump, a shape, rising under the blanket. Too large, too still. It had been there the entire time. I shot out of bed so fast, I nearly collapsed. My legs gave out, and I slammed into the floor. But I didn't stop. I scrambled backward like a wild animal, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. And then, the blanket started to slip down. Something was under there, and it was sitting up. I didn't wait to see what it was. I bolted, straight out of my bedroom, straight through the hallway, and into my kitchen. I grabbed the first thing I could find, a knife. My hands were slick with sweat, my body trembling so hard the blade clattered against the countertop. I stood there, panting, my ears ringing, my vision blurred at the edges. Silence. Nothing moved. But then, from the hallway, a sound, software, gentle, a footstep, not normal, not human. It was too wet, like something soaked in blood was stepping across my floor. I gripped the knife tighter. My breath came in ragged gasps. Another step, closer, and then I saw it. It wasn't walking, it was crawling. A figure, tall and broken, moving on its hands and feet like a spider. Its body twitched, jerking like something was wrong with its bones. And its face, I swear to God, it had no eyes, just empty sockets, black and bleeding, staring straight at me. And then, it smiled, a grin too wide, too deep, lips splitting at the edges, and it spoke. You let me in. My vision blurred, my head pounded, and then, the lights went out. The darkness. I don't know how long I stood there, frozen, in that suffocating blackness. The air around me felt thick, like something was pressing against my skin, seeping into my pores. And then, a hand touched my shoulder. Cold, wrong, fingers curling, digging into my skin slowly. I screamed. I swung the knife, wildly, blindly, but it hit nothing. And then I heard it, a whisper, right next to my ear. I was already inside. I ran. Again. I don't know how I made it out. I don't remember unlocking the door, or running down the hallway, or bursting into the street. But suddenly, I was outside, and I was not alone. There were people now, staring at me. Not normal, not right. Their faces were too smooth, their eyes too dark, and all of them were smiling, the same stretched, bleeding grin. And then they started moving toward me. I turned and ran. I ran until my lungs gave out, until my legs burned and my body collapsed. I didn't stop until I was far, far away. But it didn't matter, because when I finally stopped, when I finally turned around, I saw the Polaroid lying on the ground, face down, waiting. I bent down, my hand shaking. I picked it up and turned it over. It was me, standing outside, and behind me, that thing. Its face was clear now, and it was wearing my skin, smiling, waiting. This kind of fear that doesn't leave you. It buries itself inside your bones, rotting you from the inside out, twisting reality until you don't know what's real anymore. That's the fear I've been living in since the moment I turned over that Polaroid. It was me, standing in the street, breathless, exhausted, terrified. And behind me, that thing, it had my face, my skin, my eyes. But the eyes weren't right, too wide, too bright, too hungry. And it was smiling, a real smile, not forced, not a grotesque mockery of human expression like before. It was satisfied, like it had won. I dropped the Polaroid, my entire body locked up, my throat so dry I thought I might choke. I turned, and there it was, standing across the street, still, silent, watching, no flickering, no glitches, no movement between rooftops. It had stepped fully into my world. I don't remember making the decision to run. I don't even remember moving. But suddenly, I was sprinting. I don't know where I was going. I don't know what my plan was. All I knew was that I couldn't let it catch me. I turned corners blindly, ran through empty streets that shouldn't have been empty. No headlights, no sirens, just rows of buildings with blackened windows stretching endlessly into the distance, like the world was shrinking, closing in. And then I saw it, a gas station, fluorescent lights buzzing weakly, a single car parked out front. I didn't stop to think. I just threw myself inside. The attendant, the buzzer over the door rang as I stumbled in, gasping for air. The guy behind the counter looked up, lazily chewing gum, his face lit by the dull glow of his phone. For the first time in what felt like hours, I was in a place that felt normal. "Help me," I gasped, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles turned white. "Please, something's after me." The attendant blinked, slowly. Then he looked past me, toward the door. I turned, but there was nothing there. No shadow, no figure. Just the dark, empty parking lot. My breath hitched. I shook my head, trying to force words out. No, I swear to God, it was just... Hey man. The guy finally spoke. His voice was flat, emotionless. I turned back to him, and my stomach dropped. His eyes. They weren't right. At first, I thought it was the reflection of his phone screen, but then I realized they were too bright, too wide, too hungry. Like the thing. Like me. I stumbled back, knocking over a display of cheap sunglasses. My entire body was shaking, my heartbeat hammering so hard it hurt. The guy smiled, that same stretched, bleeding grin. And then he tilted his head, not slightly, not like a normal person. It snapped, a full 90 degrees, and he kept smiling. I turned and ran. I crashed through the doors, my legs nearly giving out beneath me. The parking lot was still empty, still wrong, but I didn't stop. I just kept running, until I found myself back home. The return. I don't remember making the choice to go back, but I was there, standing in front of my apartment building. Everything inside me screamed, "Don't go in," but something deeper pulled me forward. I stepped inside. The hallway was too quiet. The air felt wrong, like the walls were breathing. I forced myself to move, my pulse hammering in my ears. One step, another, and then I saw it. My front door, slightly open, just enough to show me what was inside. The blanket, sitting in the center of my apartment, laid out perfectly, waiting for me. I wanted to turn around. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. I took a step inside, and the door slammed shut behind me. The end. The moment the door closed, everything changed. The air grew thick, the lights flickered, and then a voice, right behind me. "Lay down." I turned slowly, and there it was. Me, but not me. The thing, the copy, standing in the center of my apartment, smiling, waiting. I couldn't breathe. It raised a hand, and then it spoke. "It's time." The lights went out. The air turned to ice. And the last thing I remember was the feeling of something cold and wet crawling over my skin, pulling me down, into the blanket, into the dark. And then, nothing. Epilogue. If you're reading this, it's already too late. I don't know how long I've been here. I don't know if I'm still me. I wake up in my apartment, but it's not mine. The walls feel too close. The air is too thick. The windows don't show the outside anymore, just an endless, empty blackness. And sometimes I see it, watching me, smiling, wearing my face, waiting for someone else to buy the blanket, for someone else to bring it home, for someone else to let him in, because once you do, you belong to him now, forever. I found dark web doctors who promised to operate me from cancer. I woke up during the surgery, and they weren't trying to save me. I don't know how to start this, because I don't think there's a right way to explain something like this. I don't expect you to believe me. If I were you, I wouldn't believe me either. But I'm writing this because I need someone to know what happened. I need someone to understand what they did to me. It all started with a death sentence. The diagnosis, the pain in my stomach started small. A tight, dull ache that came and went, like I'd eaten something bad. At first, I ignored it. I was 27, healthy, working an average job in an average city. I lived alone in a one-bedroom apartment. I ordered way too much DoorDash, and I spent my nights scrolling through my phone like every other mindless idiot. Then the pain got worse. It wasn't just an ache anymore. It was sharp, a twisting knife in my gut that wouldn't go away. I lost weight without trying. I woke up nauseous, sometimes vomiting blood. I kept telling myself it was stress, or maybe an ulcer, or anything other than what it really was. Then I went to the doctor. The tests came back quick. A CT scan, a biopsy, and then the words that would change everything. Stage 3 stomach cancer. I felt like I wasn't even in my own body when they said it. I was watching from far away, like a stranger had taken my place in that chair. We'll need to start chemotherapy immediately. We can discuss surgical options, but survival rates aren't ideal at this stage. We'll do everything we can to extend your life. I barely processed anything after that. Extend. They weren't talking about curing me. They were talking about delaying the inevitable. I went home that night and sat in the dark, staring at the wall, feeling my stomach cramp and twist, like it was reminding me that I was rotting from the inside out. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't want to see the pity in their eyes, the fake hopefulness in their voices. I just wanted a way out, a real one. The search. At first, I went down all the usual rabbit holes. I joined online forums for cancer patients, read through pages of people sharing their miracle cures and alternative treatments. It was all the same garbage: juice cleansers, essential oils, overpriced vitamins that promised to kill cancer cells naturally. I wasn't that stupid. I knew most of it was bullshit, but I kept looking. Then I started finding weirder things. Posts about experimental treatments that weren't approved in the US. Surgeries that hospitals weren't allowed to perform. Private clinics in countries with no medical oversight. People who claimed they had been cured by doctors who didn't follow the rules. I kept digging. That's when I found the forum. It didn't have a name. No ads, no clutter, just a black background with plain white text. There were only a handful of posts, but one caught my attention immediately. They don't want you to know this cancer treatment exists. I clicked. The post was written by someone claiming to be a doctor. It described a private facility, one that operated off the grid, where patients with no hope went when they had run out of options. We have saved those deemed unsavable. Our procedures have a 98% success rate. If you are serious about surviving, contact us. At the bottom of the post was an email address, no phone number, no location, just an encrypted Proton mail address. I stared at it for a long time. My rational brain told me this was insane, that it was a scam, or a cult, or some black market organ trafficking scheme. But the part of me that didn't want to die, that part hit send. The email, I kept it simple. Subject, I need help. Message, I was diagnosed with stage 3 stomach cancer. I don't have a lot of time. Please tell me more about your treatment. I didn't expect a response. Maybe some automated message, or nothing at all. But 2 hours later, my phone buzzed. From Dr. Hall. Subject, we can help you. I swallowed hard and clicked. We've reviewed your case. Your condition is severe, but not untreatable. Our procedures are not available in traditional hospitals, but our success rate is significantly higher. If you are serious about surviving, reply with your phone number. I hesitated. My stomach twisted, not from the cancer, but from something else, something wrong. But then I thought about the alternative, the slow, wasting death, the chemo that would destroy me before the cancer even could. The hospital bed, the machines, the pity in my family's eyes as they watched me disappear. I wasn't ready to die, so I replied. I gave them my number, and that was the biggest mistake of my life. The call my phone rang at exactly 3 a.m. I answered before I could think about it. Hello? Silence. Then, a voice. Is this my name? Something about the way he said my name made my entire body go cold. Yeah, who's this? Dr. Hall. You reached out to us. His voice was too calm, too professional. No sales pitch, no warmth, just a statement of fact. Yeah. What exactly are you offering? A pause. Then, a cure. My breath caught in my throat. A cure? Yes. A single procedure. No chemotherapy. No radiation. You will walk away cancer-free. It was what I wanted to hear. It was exactly what I'd been hoping for. But something about the way he said it made my skin crawl. Why isn't this available in hospitals? Because hospitals follow rules. We do not. That should have been my first red flag. How much does it cost? Nothing. I felt the chill creep down my spine. Nothing? You don't pay unless it works. That was the hook. Because real scams, they take your money first. These guys, they were offering something that sounded too good to be fake. Where are you located? Not over the phone, he said. A driver will pick you up tomorrow night. You will be transported to our facility. Everything in me screamed that this was wrong, but the part of me that wanted to live was louder. Okay. Good. Pack a bag. We'll handle the rest. The line went dead. I sat there in the dark, phone still pressed to my ear, my stomach twisting in a way that had nothing to do with the cancer. Somewhere deep inside me, I knew. I had just agreed to something I could never take back. I don't think I fully understood what I had agreed to. Not when I sent the email, not when I answered the call, not even when I heard my own voice say, okay. It wasn't until I was sitting in my apartment, staring at the clock as it crept toward midnight, that I started to feel it. That slow, creeping realization that I'd invited something into my life that I couldn't take back. At 11:30 p.m., I packed a bag, just the essentials, a change of clothes, my phone, my passport. Something in me told me I'd be leaving the country, though I still didn't know where. At 11:45 p.m., I looked out the window. The black SUV was already there. No headlights, no engine noise, just sitting in the dark, like it had been waiting there all night. And then the driver's side door opened. A man stepped out. He was wearing a black suit, no tie, no name tag. He had sunglasses on, which was insane because it was the middle of the night. His face was completely expressionless, like he was waiting in line for coffee instead of picking up a dying man willing to sell his soul for a cure. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out. Unknown number. I answered. Step outside. My stomach twisted. The voice wasn't Dr. Halls. It was someone else. Come to the car. I hesitated. My body was screaming at me not to go, but I was already in too deep, wasn't I? I slung my bag over my shoulder and stepped outside. The air was thick, humid. The city felt too quiet, like everything had been muted, like I had stepped into a different version of reality where the normal rules didn't apply. The man in the suit opened the back door of the SUV. Get in. His voice was flat, emotionless. I did. The door shut behind me with a sound that made my stomach drop. A finality, like a coffin closing. The drive. There was a partition between me and the driver. No way to talk to him. No way to see where we were going. My phone still had service, but something told me that if I tried to call anyone, it wouldn't end well. The car pulled away from my apartment. I watched the familiar streets slip past, fading into the night. I kept expecting us to head toward the airport, but we didn't. Instead, we went deeper, past the city limits, onto the highway, then onto roads I didn't recognize. The streetlights disappeared. The buildings thinned out until there was nothing but trees and darkness. My stomach churned. Where are we going? No answer. I tried again. Are we going to an airport? Nothing. I leaned forward, pressing my palm against the partition. It didn't budge. The car kept driving. An hour passed, then another. The roads turned to gravel. The trees outside the window grew thicker, denser, pressing in like a black tunnel. My chest tightened. Something was wrong. Hey, I said louder this time. Where the hell are we? A hissing sound filled the car. I barely had time to react before everything went black. The awakening. I woke up to screaming. Not mine. Someone else's. The kind of scream that doesn't sound human. The kind of scream that sounds like something is being done to a person that they aren't supposed to survive. My head felt wrong. Thick, slow, like my brain was swimming through sludge. I tried to move. I couldn't. My wrists were strapped down. My ankles, too. I was lying on a metal table. Not a hospital bed. A table. The air smelled wrong. A mix of bleach, antiseptic, and something underneath it. Something metallic. Something that made my stomach turn. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was so dry that no sound came out. Footsteps, clicking against the tiled floor, coming closer. I turned my head, my vision still swimming. Dr. Hall stood beside me, dressed in white, smiling. You're awake, he said, like this was normal, like I was a patient waking up after a routine checkup. What? My throat barely worked. Where? Shh. He pressed a gloved finger to my lips. His hand was cold, too cold. You're safe now. Lies. I turned my head, forcing my vision to focus, and that's when I saw the other tables, lined up along the walls, bodies strapped to them, some still, some twitching, and some missing pieces. My stomach heaved. I would have thrown up, but there was nothing in me to give. Dr. Hall followed my gaze and smiled. It's fascinating, isn't it? I shook my head, panic rising. I don't. You agreed to this, he said. His voice was so calm. You gave yourself to us. No, I whispered. I didn't. You did. He reached down and adjusted something on my arm. I felt the IV line, the slow drip of something cold seeping into my veins. Relax, he murmured. You'll feel everything soon enough. I fought against the straps, hard. My wrists burned, my skin tearing against the restraints. Please, I choked. Please, don't. His smile never faded. We're not trying to save you. And then they started cutting. There are some kinds of pain that the human brain isn't designed to understand. The kind that peels away sanity. The kind that rewires your nervous system so that all you can do is exist inside of it, drown in it, become it. I learned that pain in the operating room of a place that shouldn't exist. The first cut, they didn't knock me out. They wanted me awake. I felt the scalpel before I even saw it. A thin, biting pressure against my stomach. Too clean, too precise, too cold. The kind of pain that takes your breath away before your brain even processes that something is horribly wrong. I tried to scream. A gloved hand covered my mouth. Shh. Dr. Hall's voice, smooth as silk, unbothered, patient, entertained. You'll ruin the procedure if you keep moving. The cut widened. I felt the skin separate. I felt the edges of my stomach pull apart, exposing the raw, screaming nerve endings beneath. A second later, something slid inside me. Not a hand, not a tool. Something alive, something wet, something that moved. I thrashed. My back arched so hard that my spine nearly snapped in half. My hands clawed against the leather straps binding me to the table, my fingernails splitting against the metal buckles. Dr. Hall sighed, disappointed. I told you not to move. Something clamped onto my intestines. I felt it digging in. Suckers, tiny writhing appendages, curling around my insides like roots sinking into soil. No, I sobbed. No, no, no. They tightened. My vision flashed white. The room of failed experiments. I lost time. Maybe seconds. Maybe hours. When I came back, I wasn't alone. I could hear them. Not the doctors. The others. I turned my head. The room was lined with metal tables, just like mine. And on those tables, they weren't people anymore. They had been. Once. Now, they were open. Some of them were still breathing, their chests rising and falling in shallow, twitching movements. Their stomachs were gaping wounds, peeled open and left that way, exposed, violated. And inside them were things, moving, pulsating, twisting things. They had put something inside of them, and now those things were feeding. A choked sob tore from my throat. I yanked at my restraints with everything I had, ignoring the raw, bloody flesh of my wrists. A face turned toward me. A woman, or what was left of one. Her lips had been sewn shut. Her eyes were wide, bulging, full of agony. Her stomach was a ruined cavity, something dark and wet coiling inside of it. She looked at me, begging, and then she started convulsing. Her entire body arched, spasmed, seized, and then she stopped. Just stopped, like someone had flipped a switch. The thing inside her kept moving. I threw up, or I tried to. There was nothing left in me, only terror, only pain, only the horrifying, undeniable realization that this wasn't a surgery. This was a breeding ground. The purpose, I can see it in your eyes. Dr. Hall, standing over me, peeling off his bloody gloves, his mouth curled into that same charming, empty smile. You understand now, don't you? I couldn't speak, couldn't move, could only stare up at him, my chest rising and falling too fast, my heart slamming against my ribs like it was trying to break free. You thought we were saving you. He leaned down, his voice a gentle whisper. Number, we were preparing you. I shook my head. Tears slid down my temples, pooling in my hair. You were sick, weak, defective. Now, you'll be reborn. I screamed. I didn't care anymore. I screamed for someone to hear me, for someone to stop this. Dr. Hall simply placed a hand on my forehead. It's already inside you. My breath caught. I froze. And then I felt it. Something moving. Inside me. Something spreading, crawling, digging deeper, feeding, changing me. My entire body convulsed. White-hot agony tore through my abdomen, rippling through my nerves like electricity, setting every inch of me on fire. Don't fight it, Dr. Hall murmured. It's already too late. The thing inside me twitched, and then it began to grow. I never knew it was possible to feel something growing inside you. I thought pain was something your body just endured, something static, a signal to tell you something was wrong. But this wasn't pain. This was invasion. I could feel it moving beneath my skin, squirming, burrowing, spreading. It wasn't just in my stomach anymore. It was everywhere, through my veins, under my ribs, curling around my spine, tightening, pulsating, changing me. The awakening Dr. Hall stood over me, watching, studying. The first stage is always the worst, he said softly, like he was explaining a routine side effect. I couldn't breathe. My lungs felt smaller, compressed, like something was squeezing them from inside. Your body is resisting, he continued. It won't last long. I tried to scream, but my throat closed. Something inside me tightened, twisted. My arms jerked against the leather straps, my fingers curling like claws, my nails digging into my own palms. Something wet and thick slid through my ribs. I could feel it. The thing inside me. Not a tumor, not a parasite. Something worse. Something that was becoming me. Dr. Hall tilted his head, watching. Fascinating. I thrashed so hard that my wrist snapped against the restraint. A pop, a splintering crack, and then the pain hit. It wasn't human pain anymore. It was deeper. It spread through my nerves like fire, creeping up my arms, sinking into my skull, pushing into the soft, vulnerable meat of my brain. My vision flickered. Not darkness, not unconsciousness, something else. A second sight. I saw things that weren't there, shapes that shouldn't exist, movements that weren't human. And then, a voice. Not Dr. Hall's, not mine, not anything from this world. Mine. It came from inside me. I stopped breathing. Dr. Hall smiled. There it is. He turned to his assistants. Prepare the next phase. Number 1 lunged. I don't know how I did it, but I ripped my arm free. The leather strap tore like wet paper. My skin. It was different. I could feel it. Tougher. Harder. Slick. The bones in my wrist had reset themselves. The broken ones. The ones that should have left me in agony. I didn't feel them anymore. I didn't feel human anymore. Dr. Hall raised an eyebrow. Interesting. I swung at him. My fingers closed around his throat. For a second, I thought I had won. I thought I could crush his windpipe, tear it out, do anything to stop him. But then, his skin shifted. His mouth stretched. Too wide, too long. And then he laughed. Not a human laugh. A deep, guttural rattle that crawled inside my ears and nested in my skull like worms squirming through my thoughts. I yanked my hand away. His neck sealed itself back together, untouched, like I had never even touched him. I scrambled backward, trying to get off the table, trying to run. But my legs, they didn't work, not the way they were supposed to. They felt wrong, heavy, different. I looked down, and my stomach dropped. The transformation. I wasn't wearing a hospital gown anymore. I wasn't wearing anything. My skin, it wasn't skin anymore. It was slick, black, almost oily, like something grown in a petri dish instead of born. My veins, they weren't veins. They were moving. I could see them shifting beneath the surface, crawling, spreading like roots digging into flesh. And my fingers, oh God, my fingers were longer, not by much, just by inches, but I could see it, feel it. My nails had thickened, sharpened, and my bones, I could feel them changing, stretching, reconstructing, not breaking, evolving. The process is accelerating faster than expected, Dr. Hall murmured. His voice was too calm, too pleased. He reached out, running a finger down my arm. I flinched. His touch was cold, not temperature cold, wrong cold. The kind of cold that doesn't exist in nature. The kind of cold that sinks into your mind, into your marrow, into the spaces between your cells. You're going to be beautiful. I turned my head, my pulse hammering so hard I could barely think. And that's when I saw them, the others, still strapped to their tables, some still human, some not. Some were farther along than me. Their arms weren't arms anymore. Their mouths weren't mouths. Some of them were moving, twitching, trying to speak through ruined, shredded throats that no longer belonged to them. A few were still alive. I saw tears in their inhuman eyes, and I realized they knew. They were still inside there, still trapped, still screaming, still aware of everything that had been done to them. And it was happening to me. The escape. I wasn't going to let it happen. I wasn't going to become them. I lunged from the table. I don't know how I did it. My legs weren't even working right, but something inside me moved, and I was up. Dr. Hall didn't stop me. He just watched, smiling, like this was all part of the plan. I crashed into the nearest assistant, sending them sprawling to the floor. Then I ran. My legs bent wrong. They weren't moving the way I remembered them moving, but they were fast. I bolted down the hallway, my bare feet slapping against the cold floor. The facility was bigger than I thought. Hallways stretched in every direction. Doors, rooms, windows that showed things I can't describe, things I won't, things that don't belong in this world. I turned a corner and an alarm blared. Red lights flashed overhead. I could hear them coming after me, not running, not chasing, just waiting, waiting for me to realize there was no way out, and the thing inside me wasn't done growing. There is a point where pain stops being pain. It stops feeling like something that happens to you and starts feeling like something that owns you. It takes over your body, turns every breath into a knife, every heartbeat into a thudding, screaming reminder that you are not supposed to be alive anymore. I had crossed that point, and something else had crossed with me. The hunt. The alarm blared overhead, soaking the walls in violent red flashes. I ran, bare feet slapping against the freezing tile, my lungs burning like they weren't lungs anymore, my ribs stretching like something inside me was pushing them apart. I didn't recognize my own body. My legs moved wrong, not clumsy, too fast, too smooth, too perfect, like they weren't mine. But I needed them to be mine, because behind me I could hear footsteps, slow, patient, not running, not chasing, just following. Like Dr. Hall knew exactly how this would end. I turned a corner. The hallway ahead stretched into darkness. Doors lined both sides, some open, some cracked, just enough to let shadows slip through. I didn't want to see what was inside them, but I did. The rooms weren't hospital rooms. They were cages, cells built into walls, and inside them were patients, or what used to be patients. They weren't screaming anymore. They weren't alive enough to scream. They just twitched. Some of them still had eyes, some didn't. Some had mouths where mouths shouldn't be. Some had limbs that had twisted into spirals, fused into the walls, merged with the metal like their bodies had decided to keep growing past the point where nature had told them to stop. I kept running. I reached a door at the end of the hall. No handle, no lock, just a solid slab of metal. I slammed my fists against it. "Let me out!" My voice didn't sound like mine. It came from too deep inside me, like something else was speaking with me, with inside me. I turned around. Dr. Hall stood at the other end of the hall, not running, just waiting. He wasn't alone. The other doctors were with him. Some still wore their blood-stained gloves. Some held tools, not surgical tools, restraints, hooks, things designed to pull something out of something else, things designed to drag something back to where it belonged. And in that moment, I realized they weren't chasing me. They were letting me run because they knew I wasn't leaving. They knew I belonged here because the thing inside me, it wasn't finished. The Truth Dr. Hall stepped forward. "You feel it, don't you?" His voice was so calm, like this was all expected, like I was expected. "It's waking up." I shook my head. I didn't want to hear him. I didn't want to understand him. But I did, because he was right. I could feel it, inside me, pulsing, growing, pushing against my skin, like it was stretching its legs for the first time. It wasn't just in me anymore. It was me. "What did you do to me?" Dr. Hall smiled. "We saved you." I backed against the door. My breath came in sharp, ragged gasps. My hands were shaking. No, not shaking, twitching, like they were learning something new. I looked down, and my fingers were moving on their own, stretching, lengthening. My skin rippled as something slithered beneath it. I choked on my own breath. "No!" Dr. Hall tilted his head. "Yes." Something inside me twitched. My spine arched. It felt like my ribs were being peeled apart from the inside. Something was pushing through. I screamed. Dr. Hall stepped closer. "You should be honored. You're the first one to make it this far. The others rejected the process. But you," he touched my arm. I felt his fingers sink into my skin like it was soft clay. "You are perfect," I lashed out. My hand moved too fast. My fingers dug into his neck, and they went through. Not like a human hand, like claws, like teeth. Dr. Hall didn't move. He just smiled. "Ah!" Blood slid down his throat. Black. Too dark. Too thick. But he didn't fall. Didn't die. Didn't care. "Good," he whispered. "Now do it again." I ripped my hand away. My fingers left deep, gaping holes in his flesh. But there was no muscle beneath. No bone. Just more of him. More of what he really was. And then he laughed. A sound that wasn't human. A sound that never had been. I turned, and I ran. I ran through the halls, through the screaming walls, through the twisting, moving corridors that wanted to keep me inside. I ran until I found a door that wasn't locked, and I burst through it, and I fell. The aftermath. I woke up on the side of a road. The sun was rising. The sky was soft pink, empty. There was no facility behind me. No doors, no walls, no Dr. Hall. Just nothing. Like it had never been there. Like it had never existed. I stood up. My clothes were torn. My skin wasn't. I looked down at my hands. They were normal. No claws. No darkness moving beneath the flesh. Just me. But I knew. It was still inside me, waiting, watching, and one day, it will wake up again, and next time, I won't be able to stop it.